Speaker is Daniel Olushola. He is an educator and founder of Reformation World Classical Christian School, Nigeria. A fellow of Albertus Magnus Classical Institute. His passion is to see schools in Africa saturated with the truth, beauty, and goodness of God. Daniel occasionally writes for the Gospel Coalition. He's interested in Reformed theology, classical education, and Austrian economics. Daniel will be speaking on shaping Western civilization through classical education. Over to you, Daniel.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be speaking on shaping African civilization through classical education. In 2017, we started a classical Christian school in Nigeria. One of our objectives as a non-conventional academic institution is to take seriously the concept of ideas. Why is this so? The statement, ideas have consequences, is a simple yet profound one. Some ideas over centuries have shaped human civilization, while others have only made our reality an eyesore. Western culture in practice is an aggregation of different ideas. Ideas sourced from antiquity, that is during the early founding of Rome, through to the Renaissance, the era when William Shakespeare penned his masterpieces. Our goal today is not to study the glories of Western civilization, but to use the West as a framework to understand how great civilizations are built, although it is now crumbling under the weight of postmodernism. Education is a transmission of culture. Culture, on the other hand, is the vehicle upon which civilization spins. Sir Roger Scruton, a great philosopher, in his book Modern Culture, expounds on the roles universities play in transmitting culture. He gleaned from Wilhelm von Humboldt, who argued that the purpose of a university is to preserve and enhance cultural inheritance and to impart it to the next generation. This is why we must not reduce culture to food, clothing, or language. It goes beyond that. The brightest idea on how to build a unique civilization on our continent, Africa, is the Pan-Africanist. Pan-Africanism, according to the historian.com website, was an attempt to create a sense of brotherhood and collaboration among all people of African descent, whether they lived inside or outside of Africa. At the core of the Pan-Africanism is the belief that the government will be the most effective vehicle to realize their utopia. K. Matthew, in a journal titled Renaissance of Pan-Africanism, the African Union, observed that the ideological basis of the African Union, like the Organization of African Unity, OAU earlier, is Pan-Africanism. As an idea and a movement, it reflects pride in the African continent and Africanism, and a commitment to the unity and self-rule. Before independence, he continued, common color and shared suffering under European colonialism provided an adequate basis for the development of Pan-Africanism, end quote. Using the government to achieve this task will only lead to further degeneration of our continent, but I digress. While the ambition of the Pan-Africanists appear noble, I believe this approach is dangerous. At the core of the Pan-African belief is the idea that knowledge should be accommodated or rejected on the basis of its origin and not on the validity of its truth claim. If an idea is African, pro-African, and from a Black man, it should be embraced heartily. If it is from a white woman or from the West, it ought to be rejected because beneath it is some hideous neocolonial ambition. The other day, a young Black woman passionately put forth the notion that we ought to decolonize physics and undo the white supremacy of Isaac Newton. According to her, Western knowledge is totalizing. It is saying that it was Newton and only Newton who knew or saw an apple falling and out of nowhere decided that gravity existed and created an equation, and that is it. Whether people knew Newton or not, or whatever happens to Western Africa or modern Africa, the thing is the only way to explain gravity is through Newton, who sat under a tree and saw an apple fall. According to her, Western modernity is a problem that decolonization directly deals with. And she insists that we ought to pursue decolonization by having knowledge that is produced by us, that is by Blacks, that speaks to us, that is able to accommodate knowledge from our own perspective. Apart from the ambition to dismantle whiteness and other supposed Western strongholds, Pan-Africanism do not have, or Pan-Africanists do not have a definite philosophy of life. To them, we must occupy our minds with their salient ambition of fighting our perceived oppressors. But is this the right approach? Unknown to some of our Pan-Africanist friends, Western philosophy did not originate exclusively from the West. Western intellectuals pulled the best ideas that great civilizations could afford, wisely knit them together and made them their own. According to Hillsdale College, Western philosophy began in ancient Greece as a pursuit of knowledge about human nature and the best way of life. Later, medieval Christian philosophers sought to understand the relationship between faith and reason. This is to say, the Western philosophers checked Jerusalem and embraced her Judeo-Christian spiritual legacy. They visited Athens and adopted her intellectual discipline, the Arabian world for her numerical abilities, Rome for her great political institutions, and London for her industrial powerhouses. It is said that civilization has three main building blocks: faith, family, and government. But the unifying factor or the cohesive force for our faith, family, and the government is education. Without true education, there is no way you will effectively comprehend or communicate the tenets of your faith, or confidently embrace the role you ought to play in maintaining a beautiful home, or understand the function of citizens as separate from the state. Sadly, our education in Africa, as our first speaker has sufficiently covered in the first segment, has been heavily progressive, and this progressivism has eaten deeply into our faith, family, and government. This model of education was proposed by the American humanist called John Dewey. The strategy employed by the proponents of progressive education is to have people pursue knowledge because it will be useful. If an idea doesn't put food on your table or support the agenda of the state, then it won't be worth your study. We would rather discuss the colors of the traffic light or what to do when you're about to cross the highway than to wrestle with the greatest minds in history. This is why government design curriculums are heavily practical, with little or no emphasis on ideas. It is said that Plato, the great philosopher who founded the academia at Athens, had a student struggling with the abstract concept of Platonic mathematics ask him, what practical end do these theorems afford? Plato, in anger, asked one of his servants to give the young man a small coin that he may feel that he has gained something from his teaching, and then expelled him. Sounds pretty much like a Nigerian student. In a tweet, now deleted, titled 7 Reasons Why Degree Holders May Be Poor, a short article written by Malam Mahmuda Kabir.Sima was shared by the Nigerian Ministry of Education. It reads, and I quote, basically, there are 7 reasons why degree holders are poor. A, they don't think beyond their certificates. B, they prioritize their certificates more than their gifts and talents. C, their certificates prepare them for a world that no longer exists. D, they know less about themselves and more about things. E, certificates and degrees can kill initiatives. F, degrees and certificates position you to look for jobs and not for opportunity. And lastly, certificates and degree prepare people to look for security and not to take risk. This is actually coming from the people responsible for directing, licensing, and overseeing the educational system in Nigeria. My pick from Malam Mahmuda's treatise is that the progressive education our government license, though modern, will prepare you for a world that no longer exists. It wrecks everything it touches. Classical education, on the other hand, encourages people to seek knowledge for its sake, even if the said knowledge has no immediate practical end. This is why more time is spent in classical schools reading Homer's Iliad, Virgil's Aeneid, Holy Scriptures, Calvin's Institutes, Augustine's Confessions, Plato's Apology, Aristotle's Ethics, Things Fall Apart by Achebe, the Westminster Catechism, and little or no time is spent memorizing the name of Nigerian ministers or the different ways different tribes in Nigeria show respect to their elders. The beauty of classical education is that it equips you adequately to learn for yourself. So if a new idea or technology is put forth, you can easily understand its workings and quickly adopt. Christopher Perrin defines classical education as the authoritative, traditional, and enduring form of education begun by the Greeks and Romans, developed through history, and now being renewed and recovered in the 21st century. Andrew Kern defines classical education as the cultivation of wisdom and virtue by nourishing the soul on the true, the good, and the beautiful. For my audience, I will define classical education as the study of the 7 liberal arts of the trivium and the quadrivium. The trivium is the art of language where grammar, logic, and rhetoric are studied extensively. The quadrivium is the quantitative arts. This stage is actually equivalent to today's university level, where the foundation of the trivium is built upon by studying geometry, astronomy, music, and arithmetic. This type of education over the centuries shaped Western civilization and has the capacity of shaping ours in Africa. One thing we should all understand is that classical education is best conveyed through the great books. The great books are those books that are traditionally and institutionally regarded as constituting or best expressing the foundations of Western culture. Africa needs her own canon of such authoritative, traditional, and enduring great books. Africa is the way she is today because we are implementing a lot of bad ideas. We need great books to gain great ideas because great ideas build great civilizations. We must wrestle with the greatest mind history has produced through their books, with Plato's idea of justice and music, Aristotle's view of the moral and intellectual virtue, Aquinas' argument on the existence of God, Nietzsche's burden with the crisis of reason, and Lewis's proposal for the recovery of reason. Carl Sagan in his book, Cosmos said, and I quote, "Books permit us to voyage through time, to tap the wisdom of our ancestors. The library connects us with the insight and knowledge painfully extracted from nature, of the greatest minds that ever were, with the best teachers drawn from the entire planet and from all our history, to instruct us without tiring and to inspire us to make our own contribution to the collective knowledge of humanity. I think the health of our civilization, the depth of our awareness about the underpinnings of our culture, and our concerns for the future can all be tested by how we support our libraries," end quote. I will ask you all to be intentional about pursuing the truth, the goodness, and the beauty of the classics from its books, architecture, and way of life. Working together, we will shape our civilization and build a virtuous future for our offsprings. At Reformation World Classical Christian School, Nigeria, we are building on a momentum that is determined to shape our world and restore the truths, goodness, and beauty of the classics in our homes, church, and government. This is why we exist. I will ask you all to be part of this movement, positioned to shape a sustainable civilization in Africa. Thank you all for